Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us again today. During our hearing last year, I raised a concern about the growing use of waivers in meeting recruiting goals, including individuals with prior criminal convictions. Sergeant Major Weimer, that had just hit the press, I think, right before our hearing, so I asked you specifically about it, and you were very gracious to get back to our office later about that. But I would, just for the benefit of the rest of the committee and just what you may have seen since then, could you talk to us a little bit about those types of waivers for criminal, past criminal behavior? I did also read today that I guess the Army now is going to allow one maybe prior, like a minor marijuana conviction that's not going to require a waiver going forward, I guess. But could you just expand a little on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Congressman. Thank you for that, and thank you for the follow-up conversation. Probably even more important. So waivers are always a touchy subject, and we have a 1-star that's in charge of our waivers. This kind of speaks a little bit to the previous restructure of U.S. Army Recruiting Command to have proper oversight. And I know her personally, and those waivers weigh heavy on her, and she denies more than she absolutely approves. But the waivers are complicated. I did not know this. I did not understand state to state is a little bit different. Pull a fire alarm as a juvenile, that's labeled one thing. Shoot a BB gun in a park, that's labeled one thing in one state and different. And when you're 13, some of those things follow you for the rest of your life. Those are some of the waivers that we discussed, and some of them are a little more extreme than that. But the confidence that I shared with you was that the waivers that we're granting are the low waivers like that. These are not the waivers. There's no sexual predators. There's no domestic violence. Those waivers don't even get to the 1-star that's in charge of the waiver process. But she still does waive. She still does waive minor ones to give troopers or potential troopers an opportunity to serve their country. But it's a whole person. It's not just the one incident. And so if you have to have a waiver for, let's say, pulling a fire alarm in a public school, schools are a little bit sensitive piece of terrain right now in high school, what's the rest of the person that's associated in this waiver process?
I'm glad to know y'all are looking at all of that. Oh, and I know you're all facing recruiting challenges, and you've all underscored a lot of those. We have a shrinking demographic. There are just fewer 18-year-olds out there today, fewer who have a connection to military history. No, so many are enter our ranks from having family experience with that. I did see, too, Sergeant Major, that the Army has recently raised its maximum age from 35 to 42. That pretty much, other than Marines, I'm not sure about what's y'all's oldest age you can enlist.
I'll come back to you, sir, but
it's not 42, but I guess,
40,
but now I guess it's 41 for the Navy, 42 for Army, Air Force, and Space Force. I thought it was interesting reading that you're seeing greater retention in some of these older folks coming in, and I get that. That makes sense. Somebody at 18 may not know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life, but they're also, the flip side of that coin is more challenges on the physical side with physical standards. How are y'all navigating that? Do you see this to be a growing trend that we're going to see an aging population in our serving in our military? And I just think the physical challenges I had at 18 were a lot different than they were at 35 or 40. And if you're starting in your 40s, I would think healthcare is going to become a significantly different picture than it is when somebody can serve 20 years and be out by 38 years old. A few things in that. Also, I'm curious to know if someone comes in at 42, are they going to automatically be allowed to serve past age 60 so they can get their 20-year retirement, or are we going to start having to do a lot of waivers for those folks? Anybody that want to opine there? And I know we got about a minute.
Sure, sir. I'll opine with you on that one. So we've had all those discussions to include the post 60, the age exception when you're post 60 if you're going to do 20. But some of those older candidates come in for very special technical MOSs, if you will, not to be a machine gunner in an infantry squad. As a matter of fact, we would the recruiter would try to convince them down a different path if their scores were higher. That's part of the conversation we're having with, improving our actual recruiters at recruiter college before they go out there. But we also have to remember we're not necessarily recruiting an older individual like that for a 20-year career. Some of them are a 2 or a 3-year assignment, and many of them are in our National Guard and Reserve. And so each one of those contracts, there's nuance to them associated with the age of the individual.
Anyone else on that?
Just an example, sir, we brought into the reserve component a former Air Force who did a career after the Air Force, cyber extraordinaire, and we brought him in. But in our culture, you still have to go to boot camp. Don't care how old you are. And but graduating boot camp, he didn't come in as a private first class. We brought him in as a gunnery sergeant in E7. The Marine Corps almost lost its mind, but we survived because of his expertise, and we'll be fine.
It's good to know.
Yes, sir. I would just say from the Space Force perspective, on some of the older recruits that are coming into the Space Force, older Guardians, the physical standards that come to the service all remain the same. But what I find interesting, if you're 35, 36 years old, you have some life experience, and you're still in a physical condition where you can meet those standards, it's because you've adopted a lifestyle of healthy living and approach. So to your point, yeah, an 18-year-old could probably grunt through some stuff, but when you're in your 30s, that's because you've been dedicated and disciplined about how you live your life. So we have seen some older individuals, but very much dedicated to holistic health approach, and they're doing fine within the Space Force as they meet the standards are the same. If you're 18 or 36, doesn't make a difference.
It's a great point. Thank you, and Chairman, I yield back.